Ruth Calloway pressed her back against the wall of the grain store and pulled her daughter close with both arms, her eyes fixed on the two men crossing the street toward them. The little girl did not make a sound. She had learned, the way children learn things they should never have to, that silence was sometimes the only thing standing between a person and the worst kind of trouble. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel. Comment the city you're watching from below and follow this story to the very end. It had started 6 days before, the way most hard things start. Not with a bang, but with a door closing. Holt Decker rode into Gracefield, Colorado on a Tuesday, which was an ordinary enough day for a man to ride into an ordinary enough town. Except that Holt Decker had not been anywhere in particular for going on 2 years, and Gracefield was the first place he had stopped long enough to unsaddle his horse without feeling the pull to move on before morning. He was 38 years old. He had a bad knee from a fall in '79, a good rifle he had not fired at a man in 4 years, and a piece of paper folded in his shirt pocket that he carried everywhere and read nowhere. He had written it himself in the weeks after his son Thomas died of the fever that took half the county that winter. It said, in his own hand, "I do not know what I am for anymore." He had written it because he thought putting it on paper might help him answer it. It hadn't. He took a room at the Gracefield boarding house, paid a week in advance, and spent the first evening sitting at the window watching the street go quiet. That was when he saw her, a woman, lean and dark-haired, moving fast along the far side of the road with a child on her hip and a bundle under her other arm. She was not walking the way a woman walks when she is heading somewhere she wants to be. She was walking the way an animal walks when it knows it is being watched. Behind her, at a distance of maybe 30 feet, came 2 men. They were not hurrying. They did not need to. Holt watched until they turned the corner and disappeared. He sat with his coffee going cold in his hand for a long time after that. In the morning, he asked Mrs. Pell, who ran the boarding house and knew everything worth knowing in Gracefield, about the woman. "That'd be Ruth Calloway," Mrs. Pell said, and her voice dropped the way voices drop when a name carries weight. "Or what's left of her." "What do you mean by that?" "Mrs." Pell set down her bread pan and looked at him like a woman deciding how much of the truth to give a stranger. She came to Gracefield 2 years back with her husband, Daniel Calloway. Daniel was a good man, decent man. He filed on a parcel east of the creek and worked it honest for 8 months before Silas Rourke decided he wanted it. Who's Silas Rourke? He owns most everything in this county worth owning. Owns the men worth owning, too. She picked the pan back up. Daniel Calloway died in what Rourke's people called an accident. Mule kicked him, they said. Left Ruth with 40 acres of creek land, a 4-year-old daughter, and a debt on the seed bill that Rourke's man at the bank called due the week after the funeral. And the town let that happen. Mrs. Pell's jaw tightened. Most of this town is in Silas Rourke's pocket one way or another. Mr. Decker. The ones that aren't are afraid of the ones that are. That's the arithmetic of Gracefield. Holt thought about the woman moving fast in the dark with a child on her hip. What does Rourke want with her now? She's got nothing left to take. Mrs. Pell was quiet for a moment. She's got the creek land. There's something under it. Rourke has himself a geologist friend from Denver who says there's silver in that creek bed. And Ruth Calloway won't sign the deed over. Not for money. Not for threats. Not for anything. She paused. And the men who follow her at night, that's Rourke's way of reminding her that she's alone. Holt went to his room. He sat on the edge of the cot with his elbows on his knees and his hands clasped, and he stared at the floor for a long time. What am I for? He did not have an answer yet. No, but he was starting to feel the shape of one. He found her the next morning at the well behind the feed store, or rather, he found the space where she had been, because when he came around the corner, she stepped back fast and put herself between him and the child, and her hand went to something at her waist. Holt stopped walking. He put his hands out, open and empty. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm not one of Rourke's men. My name is Holt Decker. I'm nobody in particular. I'm renting a room from Mrs. Pell, and I've been in this town 3 days, and I don't have a single interest in it, except that I saw 2 men following you night before last, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it." Ruth Calloway looked at him. She was younger than he'd thought from a distance, maybe 30, but her eyes were the eyes of someone who had been 30 for a long time in ways that had nothing to do with years. Her daughter stood behind her, one small fist wrapped in her mother's skirt. "What do you want, Mr. Decker?" "I don't rightly know, ma'am. I think I wanted to ask if you were all right." He paused. "Though I reckon if you were all right, you wouldn't have your hand on that knife." Ruth looked down at her own hand, like she'd forgotten it was there. She let it drop. "I'm not all right," she said. "But I haven't been all right in 2 years, and I'm still standing. So I suppose that's something." "Yes, ma'am," Holt said. "I suppose it is." The little girl peered around her mother's hip and looked at him with the flat, evaluating gaze of a child who has learned to take the measure of adults quickly. "What's your name, miss?" Holt asked. The girl looked up at her mother. Ruth gave the smallest nod. "Abigail," the girl said. "But Mama calls me Bee." "Bee," Holt said. "That's a fine name." "We have to go," Ruth said. "Yes, ma'am." He stepped aside. "One thing, if you'll permit me." She stopped. "Rourke's men. The 2 that follow you. They're going to escalate, ma'am. Men like that don't follow a woman at night forever without being told to do something more. You know that." Ruth's chin did not move. Her eyes did not change. She already knew. "Good day, Mr. Decker," she said, and walked on. Cole Whitmore found Holt on the boarding house porch that afternoon. Cole was the closest thing Gracefield had to a newspaper. He knew everything, printed nothing, and drank his whiskey slow and his gossip fast. He was 60 years old and had the look of a man who had spent 40 of those years watching bad things happen and not knowing what to do about any of them. "Saw you talking to Ruth Calloway this morning," Cole said, dropping into the chair beside Holt without being invited. So nobody talks to Ruth Calloway in this town. Not on purpose. Bad luck, people say. People say a lot of foolish things. They do. Cole turned his glass in his hands. "You know what Rourke's been doing. His man at the bank calls the debt. Ruth can't pay, which Rourke knows, because Rourke is the reason she can't pay. Bank takes the land. Rourke buys it off the bank for half what it's worth, because the bank president owes Rourke a favor from 4 years back that I won't go into here. Clean as a whistle, except she won't sign. Oh, Cole looked at him sideways. "Word is she's got something. Some kind of paper Daniel left her before he died. Man at the assayer's office let it slip to the wrong person that Daniel had the creek surveyed private before Rourke's man came around. That survey shows the silver, shows the boundaries, shows Rourke's been running stock across her property line to muddy the deed for 2 years. He paused. If that paper exists and gets to the right people, Rourke loses the land, loses the stock scheme, and loses whatever deal he made with the railroad men who've been buying silver futures on the quiet. Where is it? Cole shrugged. That's the question. Ruth hides it somewhere, and Rourke can't find it. And that's why those 2 men follow her at night instead of just burning her out. He needs the paper before he can afford to be done with her. Holt looked out at the street. The late afternoon sun lay flat and orange on the dust. What happened to Daniel Calloway? Really? Cole was quiet for a moment. Rourke's man, Ned Faber. They were alone in the barn. The mule they blamed was sold off 3 days later. Never examined. Never questioned. He finished his drink. Sheriff Pruitt wrote it up as an accident in 15 minutes flat. Holt closed his eyes for 1 second. This sheriff. He can't be moved. Pruitt's been Rourke's sheriff for 9 years. He's not corrupt the way some men are corrupt. He doesn't even know he's doing it anymore. He just does what keeps Silas Rourke happy and calls it keeping the peace. Cole stood up. I'm telling you all of this, Mr. Decker, because I have been a coward for 2 years, and I am 60 years old, and I would like to do one thing before I die that I am not ashamed of. So I am telling you, what you do with it is your business. He went inside. Holt sat on the porch until the street went dark. He went to her that night. He went because he could not sleep, and because the piece of paper in his pocket seemed heavier than it had this morning, and because, whatever he was for, he didn't think it was sitting on a porch while a woman and a child were being hunted. Ruth Calloway's house was a small, clapboard structure at the edge of the East Road, modest and dark, its garden still showing the work of hands that had cared for it, even through 2 years of grief. A light burned low in the single front window. He knocked. 3 times. Quiet. Silence. Mrs. Calloway, he said, low. Oh, it's Holt Decker. I was at the well this morning. I mean you no harm. I need to talk to you, and I think you need to talk to me. A long pause. Then the sound of a bolt drawn back. She opened the door with the knife visible in her right hand, held low and easy. Behind her, Bea sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a blanket, watching him with those quiet, measuring eyes. Holt did not look at the knife. He looked at Ruth. They're going to come for the paper, he said. Tonight or tomorrow night. They've been watching long enough. Whatever Rourke is waiting on, I think he's done waiting. How do you know that? I don't, for certain. But I know men like Ned Faber, and men like Ned Faber don't follow a woman for 2 years without somebody lighting a fire under them. Something's changed. He paused. The railroad men. They're coming to Gracefield next week. I heard it at the boarding house. Rourke needs the deed clean before they arrive. Ruth stood still in the doorway. Then she stepped back. Come in, she said, and sit where I can see your hands. He sat where she could see his hands. The kitchen was spare and clean, the kind of clean that takes effort. A child's drawing was pinned to the wall above the stove. Bea had not moved from her chair, but she had put down whatever she was holding and was looking at Holt with the full weight of her attention. My mama says you asked about her at the well, Bea said. Bea, Ruth said. I did, Holt told the girl. I wanted to make sure she was all right. She's not, Bea said simply. She cries at night when she thinks I'm asleep. Bea. She does, the girl said, unbothered. I don't say anything because she doesn't want me to know. But I know. Holt looked at the girl and felt something move in his chest that he had not felt move in 2 years. Thomas had been 4 years old. Thomas had been small and certain, and had told the truth about everything, the way children do when the world has not yet taught them that truth is sometimes more than people can bear. He did not say anything. He pressed his hands flat on the table and waited for the feeling to pass, and then he looked back at Ruth. Where is the paper, Mrs. Calloway? She studied him for a long time. Why would I tell you that? Because I'd like to help you get it to the right people before Rourke takes it. And because I don't have anything in this world that Rourke can threaten me with. No land, no business, no family. He stopped on the last word. Just for a breath. I'm the safest person in Gracefield for you to trust, ma'am, because I have nothing to lose. Something shifted in Ruth's face. Not softness exactly. Recognition. You lost somebody, she said. Not a question. Yes, ma'am? When? 2 years ago. My son. He was 4. Ruth looked at her daughter, and then looked back at Holt, and for a moment her face was just a face, without the armor. I'm sorry, she said quietly. So am I, he said. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached up and pressed 2 fingers to the wall above the window frame, feeling along the seam where the board met the plaster. She worked something loose, a folded oilskin packet, the kind used to keep papers dry. Daniel hid it the night before he died, she said. I think he knew what was coming. He didn't tell me where until the morning. Before he went out to the barn, he said, "If anything happens to me, Ruth, you get that paper to the land office in Denver." He said, "Don't go to Pruitt. Don't go to anyone in Gracefield." He said there's a federal land commissioner in Denver, a man named George Aldous, and that man is the only one who can't be bought. Holt looked at the packet in her hands. Has Rourke's people searched the house? Twice. I wasn't here either time. Mrs. Pell kept Bee while I was at the market. A ghost of something dark crossed her face. They weren't tidy about it. Then tonight they'll try different. He stood up. Mrs. Calloway, I need you to pack what you can carry. What Bee can carry. We need to be out of this house before midnight. She did not argue. That told him more about how bad it had been than anything else she had said. They left the house at 11 o'clock. Holt took the lead. Ruth walked behind him with Bee's hand in hers and the oilskin packet inside her coat against her ribs. They moved through the back of the property, through the neighbor's empty pasture, along the creek line where the willows made a wall of shadow. Bee did not make a sound. She matched her mother's stride exactly, her small boots placed in each footstep with the precision of a child who has played this game before and knows it is not a game. They were halfway to the tree line when the first man stepped out of the willows ahead of them. "Well now," said Ned Faber. His voice was conversational. He had the ease of a man who has always found the world arranges itself to his convenience. Mrs. Calloway, and a friend. He had a rifle across his arm, behind Ruth and Holt. From the direction of the house, boots hit the ground. A second man. Holt did not turn around. He did not reach for the revolver on his hip. He kept his eyes on Faber and kept his body in front of Ruth and Bee. "Faber," he said, "you know my name. I know what you did to Daniel Calloway in that barn." The conversational ease went out of Faber's face, quickly, like a lamp turned down. "That's a serious accusation for a man standing in a creek bottom at midnight." "I've made it in better places," Holt said. "I'll make it in a federal court if you give me the chance." "He won't," said the man behind them. "Bee." Ruth's voice was very quiet. "Yes, Mama. You remember what we practiced?" "Yes, Mama." Holt had 1 second to wonder what they had practiced before Bee dropped low and moved left and Ruth went right, and Holt was already drawing and firing before Faber's rifle came up. He did not hit Faber. He hit the rifle. The ball took it at the stock and spun it out of Faber's hands with a sound like a bell struck wrong. Faber swore and stepped back. The man behind them broke and ran, which told Holt everything he needed to know about that man's actual conviction. Faber looked at his empty hands, and then at Holt, and then at the small girl standing 10 feet to the left, perfectly still, watching him with eyes that did not blink. "You're done, Ned," Holt said. "Walk away. Rourke won't. Rourke is going to have more to worry about than you by the time the week is out." He paused. "And the man you brought with you is already 200 yards gone. So it's just you and me and the creek and the dark. And I am standing here with a gun that still has shots in it, and you are standing there with nothing." He let that settle. "Walk away, Ned. Go home. Think hard about whether Silas Rourke is worth dying for." Faber looked at him for a long moment. His jaw worked. Then he walked away. Ruth let out a breath beside him. Bee walked back to her mother's side and took her hand without a word, like a soldier returning to formation. "Ma'am," Holt said. "Mr. Decker, what exactly did you practice?" Ruth looked at her daughter, and something crossed her face that he realized, after a moment, was the rusted machinery of a smile trying to remember how to work. "Daniel taught us," she said quietly. "In the evenings, after supper. He said if it ever came to trouble, the two of us going separate ways would split anybody's attention and give the other one room." She looked down at Bee. "He called it the game." Bee looked up at her mother, then at Holt. Daddy made everything into a game, she said. So we wouldn't be scared. Holt pressed one hand against his own chest for a moment, above where the folded paper lived. Your daddy, he said, very carefully, was a smart man. Yes, said B. He was. Cole Whitmore had a horse and a mule, and, as it turned out, more spine than he'd given himself credit for. He was waiting at the north edge of town at midnight exactly, as Holt had asked him to be, with both animals saddled and a pack put together with the competence of a man who had done this sort of thing. At some point in a younger life he didn't talk about. You're late, Cole said. We had a delay, Holt said. Cole looked at Ruth and B and looked at Holt's face and did not ask about the delay. They rode through the night. B fell asleep on the mule with her mother's arm around her and her head against Ruth's collarbone, the way children sleep when they have finally decided that one particular adult is a safe place. Holt rode point. Cole rode rear. Nobody came after them, which meant either Faber had taken the advice or was taking the night to report to Rourke, and Rourke would need until morning to decide what to do about a problem that had changed shape on him. They had until dawn to be far enough gone that it wouldn't matter. Around 3 a.m, Cole pulled up beside Holt. Can I ask you something? You're going to whether I say yes or not. Fair. Cole rode in silence for a moment. What's keeping you here? Saw you could have ridden clear of this. You've been in Gracefield 3 days. You don't owe these women a thing. Holt rode on for a moment. I had a son, he said finally. Thomas. 4 years old. He died 2 years back. Cole said nothing. He had learned over 60 years to be quiet when a man was getting to the point. I've been riding around this territory since then, Holt said, trying to figure out what I'm for, what a man is for when the thing that gave him purpose is gone. He looked at the road ahead, and 3 days ago I looked out a boarding house window, and I saw a woman who had lost everything too, being hunted in the dark, and something in me just stopped arguing. Stopped arguing about whether it was my business, whether I had the right, whether I was too tired. He paused. I was looking for something to be for. I reckon it found me first. Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he said, very softly, that's what courage is, you know. Not the shooting part, the stopping, arguing part. They reached Denver on the 3rd morning. The land commissioner's office was in a brick building on the main street, next to a law firm, and across from a bank that had nothing to do with Silas Rourke. A clerk in a gray vest looked up when they came in. 4 people, one of them a child, all of them wearing the look of people who had slept on the ground. We need to see George Aldis, Holt said. It's a matter of a fraudulent land deed and a murder. The clerk's eyebrows went up. Mr. Aldis is in conference. I think he'll want to step out. George Aldis was a compact, a serious man of 55 with the look of someone who had heard many stories and retained the capacity to be surprised by them. He read Daniel Calloway's survey documents slowly and carefully. He read the notation in Daniel's own hand, identifying Rourke's stock encroachments. He read the names of the bank president and Sheriff Pruitt, and the 2 railroad men whose signatures appeared on a private agreement that Daniel had managed to copy in the weeks before his death. Then he took off his glasses and looked at Ruth across the desk. Mrs. Calloway, he said, how long have you been holding on to these? 2 years, she said, alone. Yes, sir. He was quiet for a moment. Your husband understood what he had. He understood everything, Ruth said. He just ran out of time. Aldis nodded slowly. Then he looked at Holt. And you are? Nobody, sir. I was in Gracefield by accident. I see. Aldis looked at him for a moment. Well, you've brought me enough to open a federal investigation into land fraud, murder, bribery of a county sheriff, and conspiracy with railroad interests. That's not nothing. He folded his glasses and set them on the desk. I can have federal marshals in Gracefield by Friday. Holt thought about Ned Faber walking away in the creek bottom. He thought about Sheriff Pruitt writing up a murder in 15 minutes. That's 3 days, sir. I'm aware. Aldous looked at him steadily. Can you give me 3 days? I can give you whatever I've got, Holt said. But I'm going back. Ruth turned to look at him. Mr. Decker, she said. You're safe here, ma'am. Aldous' office, Federal Building. They can't touch you here. He looked at her, then at Bea, who was sitting very straight in the chair beside her mother, listening to every word. But Cole is back there. And Mrs. Pell. And anybody else in that town who spoke a kind word to you in 2 years. I'm not going to leave them to Rourke's temper when he figures out what happened. Ruth looked at him for a long time. You said you had nothing left to lose, she said quietly. I did say that. Was it true? Holt looked at the little girl in the chair beside her mother. Bea was looking back at him with Thomas's eyes. Not really, not literally, but in the way that some children carry in their faces the weight of a world that has already asked too much of them. It was true when I said it, he said. I'm not sure it's true anymore. Ruth Calloway looked at him, and her chin moved, and this time the smile found its way all the way out, when tired and real and more valuable to him in that moment than anything he had been offered in 2 years of writing. You come back in one piece, Mr. Decker, she said. That is not a request. He rode back alone. Cole had stayed in Denver. His niece, he said. Though Holt thought it was more that Cole had finally done the one thing he wasn't ashamed of and wanted to be around to see it mean something. Holt reached Gracefield on Thursday morning and went straight to Mrs. Pell's boarding house and found her in the kitchen, pale and brisk, with the look of a woman who is frightened and has chosen to be angry instead. Rourke's men have been at every door in town, she said, looking for her. They won't find her. I know they won't. I'm not worried about her. I'm worried about you walking back in here like a man who forgot what a bullet is for. I'm hard to kill, ma'am. Every man thinks that right up until he's wrong about it. She put a plate of eggs in front of him. Eat. He ate. Silas Rourke came to the boarding house himself on Thursday afternoon. He was not what Holt expected. A small, neat man of 60, well-dressed, with the quiet manner of someone who had arranged the world to his liking so long ago that arranging it had become unconscious habit. He came alone. That was either confidence or stupidity, and Holt did not think it was stupidity. Mr. Decker, Rourke said, sitting down across from him on the porch without being asked. Mr. Rourke, you've made things complicated. I've done my best. Rourke studied him with the detached interest of a man looking at a piece of machinery he does not yet understand. You don't live here. You don't own here. You have no stake in any of this. No, sir. Then why? Holt looked at him. Because your man killed Daniel Calloway in a barn and walked out and called it an accident. And Daniel Calloway's daughter is 4 years old, and her name is Bea, and she sleeps quiet now, because she's learned how to be still when men come around. He let that sit for a moment. That's why. Rourke's face did not change. He was a man who had not let his face change in a long time. What do you want? Rourke said. Nothing from you, Holt said. George Aldous at the Federal Land Office has Daniel Calloway's survey, and your railroad agreement, and Ned Faber's name, and Sheriff Pruitt's name, and enough else to keep federal marshals busy in this county until the new year. That's already done. I didn't come back to bargain with you. He paused. I came back to make sure you didn't take it out on the people who couldn't leave. Rourke was very still. You think you've won something, he said. I think Daniel Calloway won it, Holt said. 2 years ago. In whatever time he had between knowing what was coming and going out to that barn. He won it for his wife and his daughter, and he just needed somebody to carry it far enough. Silas Rourke stood up. He looked at Holt with the expression of a man adding something to a column of numbers in his head. Then he walked off the porch and into the street, and did not look back. Friday came. The federal marshals came with it. Holt was sitting on the steps of the boarding house when the rider came from Denver. Not a marshal, a young man from Aldis's office with a telegram in his hand and dust on his coat. Message from Commissioner Aldis for a Mr. Decker. Holt took it. It said, "Mrs. Calloway and the child are safe. Investigation underway. Pruitt suspended pending inquiry. Faber located and held. Rourke's assets frozen pending federal review. Mrs. Calloway asks that you come back to Denver when you are able. The child asks specifically." Those were her words. G. Aldis Holt read it twice. He folded it into his shirt pocket alongside the other piece of paper. The two of them together were a strange kind of company. Cole Whitmore appeared from somewhere down the street, moving faster than a 60-year-old man had any business moving. "Well," Cole said, "it's done." Cole sat down on the step beside him. They were quiet for a while. Down the street, Mrs. Pell was sweeping her front walk with the particular energy of a woman who had been afraid for 3 days and was now somewhere on the other side of it. "You going to go back to Denver?" Cole asked. "Yes." "For the case? To testify?" Holt looked at the telegram in his hand. "For B," he said. "Mostly." Cole looked at him sideways. "And her mother?" Holt didn't answer that. But something in his face must have been answer enough, because Cole laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes up from somewhere that's been closed off a long time. "Cole," Holt said. "What?" "You're a good man. I'm a coward who waited 2 years to stop being one." "That's still stopping," Holt said. "That counts." Cole thought about that. Then he nodded. He rode into Denver on a Sunday morning. The sky was high and pale blue, the kind of sky that makes a man feel like the world has just been washed clean. He found the address Aldis's office had provided, a rented house, small, on a quiet street, with a garden that somebody had already begun to put in order. The door opened before he reached the porch. Bea stood in the doorway in a blue dress he hadn't seen before, with her hair combed and her feet bare on the boards, and her eyes exactly as he had remembered them. "Mama said you'd come back," she announced. "Your mama was right. She usually is." Bea tilted her head. "Are you going to stay this time?" Holt stopped at the foot of the porch steps. He looked at the child and passed her into the dim hall where Ruth Calloway was coming toward the door, her hair loose, her face open in a way he had not seen it before, without the armor, without the fear. The piece of paper in his pocket said, "I do not know what I am for anymore." He had written it 2 years ago and carried it ever since, because the question felt important enough to keep close, even when he had no answer. He thought he might be ready to take it out now. He thought he might be ready to let it go. "Bea," he said. "Yes? I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think hard before you answer." "Okay, do you think there's room in this house for one more?" Bea considered him with great seriousness for a full 3 seconds. Then she stepped back from the door and held it open wide. "I saved you the chair by the window," she said. "It's the best one." Holt Decker climbed the porch steps. He took off his hat. He walked through the door that a 4-year-old girl had opened for him into the rest of his life. And behind him, on a Sunday morning in Denver, with the pale blue sky above and the smell of turned garden earth in the air, the door swung quietly shut. Silas Rourke was convicted in federal court the following spring. Sheriff Pruitt resigned before charges were filed and was never seen in Gracefield again. Ned Faber served 4 years in the territorial prison, and upon his release, moved to another state and was not heard from again. Ruth Calloway's claim on the creek land was confirmed by the federal land office. The silver beneath it made her comfortable for the rest of her life. Bea Calloway grew up to be a lawyer. She argued land rights cases before the Colorado Supreme Court and never lost one. Holt Decker never did find a reason to move on from Denver. He had, at last, found out what he was for. And the chair by the window remained, for all the years that followed, the best one in the house.